Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back, wonderful technologists. Welcome back to the CT Educator podcast. So, hope you guys are having an amazing week. It's getting warmer and warmer, and I'm super excited because I'm going outside with my kids. Okay, we are going outside because I'm stuck being inside. Also, I'm tired of working. Oh my goodness, I've had such a busy week. So, this is the 30th episode for this podcast. I am so freaking grateful. Thank you so much for everybody listening. This is just so amazing that I've done 30 episodes and there is just more to come because I've got some more exciting shit for this podcast, including guests. So, this is just amazing. So it feels like a milestone. I've just love doing these podcasts, and hopefully, everybody that's listening, you're learning something or taking away some really good points from this podcast. Okay. Now, in today's episode, I wanted to talk about what is going on here and how not to be a button pusher. Now, this episode is going to be a little controversial, and I know it's probably going to rub some people the wrong way, and it's a little bit of a spicy topic. But guess what? We're going to fucking talk about it because it needs to be said, and we need to break the stereotype within our industry, in radiology as a whole, to make sure that when we're training those technologists, that we make sure we train them to be the best techs that they can be. So, I know I've spent a lot of time in radiology. I started, my x-ray journey, it was back in 2001, okay? I've been a technologist since that time. I started CT in 2003. So I have learned the ins and outs of how not to be a button pusher, okay? Because I was almost there. But I took it upon myself that I was not going to be one of those people. Okay. Now, some technologists fall into this stereotype. I mean, let's get fucking real. They do. And they become what we call, quote unquote, the button pusher. So I can tell you there's a few reasons why this happens. One of them is lack of proper training and education. So those technologists fail to get the proper training and the proper education when they're starting out. And they pick up and learn bad habits from the experienced technologists. Listen, I'm going to talk to you senior technologists out there, okay? Because I know some of you got some bad habits. Stop that shit, okay? I know I have picked up some bad habits in my career. And you know what? It took a good, strong technologist. He's 30 years in the business. I worked with him, and he's told me one day, stop that shit, because somebody's going to get hurt. Okay. And my answer was, well, this is how I've always done it, and this is how I was taught. He's like, no, we're going to stop that right now. Okay. So those are the two things that I believe that some technologists fall into becoming a typical button pusher, and because they pick up bad habits, and it's lack of proper training and education. So I'm going to go over a few examples, and I'm even going to tell you a story about a very good example that happened not too long ago, about 10 years ago, at a hospital that I worked at. It was another trauma hospital I worked at. I'm going to tell you that story in the very last example. So the first example that I typically hear all the time, and I'm pretty sure you have heard. So you have a new technologist. They are unsure on why some exams are done the way they are. Okay. So what is the response? They're just told, oh, well, you push this button, you push that button, and then you just select this exam. So the technologist asks you, okay, well, why do we do this? Well, I don't know. That's just the way it's done. I can't tell you how aggravating that is, because you're basically telling that new person, well, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I don't know, why we do this exam, and I don't know how to explain it to you, but I have to train you so we can move on with this. Okay. I know this is going to be very spicy, and some people are going to, probably not be very comfortable, but we have to talk about the things that are uncomfortable. All right. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it on this episode either, because these are real facts. And I'm pretty sure you've encountered them. I encounter them on a daily basis at every hospital I've worked at, in every sector of radiology, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, trauma. I've seen it. Okay. And it still happens to this day. Okay. So we, as the senior people, when they look up to us and they say, okay, why is it? You know what the proper answer should be? If you do not know, you can just say, you know what? I'm really unsure about that, but let me ask around so I can get the answer for you. And then, of course, if you know, teach them something. Have them learn something from you, because that is the point and that is the goal. Like, we don't gatekeep shit. We need to teach them how to do things the proper way, right? So another example that I'm going to give you is, you as the new technologist, you ask questions because you're unsure of something, maybe a protocol, maybe a policy and procedure, maybe about contrast, whatever it is. And the answer you get back is, that's the way we've always done it. I can't tell you how much that answer pisses me off, because I have heard that from so many techs, and I have fired back at one of them and I said, no, that's not how we do it. Okay. So why don't you explain to me how we do it the correct way? And I'll tell you, they couldn't even tell me how to do the correct way, because they didn't know themselves how to do it correctly. Now, listen, in this episode, I am not bashing anybody. This is not what the point is. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to point out the bad habits and the bad experiences that I'm pretty sure not only myself, but you listening have experienced. And what we need to do is we need to acknowledge them so we can correct them and make sure that it's not done incorrectly. Because if you do something incorrectly, you have to remember that patient's life is in your hands. And if you fuck up and you do something because you're not sure, you didn't ask questions, and somebody didn't teach you the right way, that patient can be seriously harmed and can die. So this episode is not bashing anybody, okay? Because I know that's exactly what I'm going to get. No, we need to acknowledge what is wrong in our industry and how we freaking correct it. That's how we need to do it, okay? This is the education piece, all right? Now, if you guys have listened to Collaboration RA, I'm telling you, that's a really good podcast. And Marceline and Reese talk about just the advocacy and just, wanting to have a voice for us in radiology and to be recognized as professionals, okay? So that's the same thing I'm doing here. As CT technologists, like, we want to be recognized as a professional, but you need to do things the right freaking way. The answer on that's the way we've always done it doesn't cut it with me. It's bullshit, because you can do it the right way and you can explain to them how to do it correctly. And if you don't know the answer, go find somebody who knows the answer. Okay. Now, the last example that I'm going to share with you, and then I'm going to tell you a story right behind it. So the last example that I see is experienced technologists feeling intimidated when a new technologist seems to know more than they do. Oh, I can't tell you how much I've seen this. But you know what? I actually encourage that. When I know a new technologist knows their shit, I'm like, yes, they're going to succeed, and they're going to fucking rock this shit. Okay? Because that's the whole point. When the student knows more than the teacher, you know you've succeeded in your job. You know you've done your job right. And you know that I'm like, all right, I trained this person correctly. You know you've done your job. Okay? I always encourage that. I always want my students or any techs that train under me to know more than me, because I know they're going to excel. Okay? Now, me, as many years of experience that I have, I still ask questions. I mean, I work with techs now. Some of them have been there for 30 plus years. I still ask them freaking questions. You know why? Because it's a learning process, and we continue to learn and learn from each other, because that's the whole point. Okay. Even as seasoned as I am, I still ask for help and I still pick their brains. Okay. Now, as an experienced technologist, listen, I'm going to talk to you, seasoned guys. Don't be intimidated by those new technologists because you know what? We want good technologists out there because we want patients to be safe. We want them to be taken care of properly. Nothing will make you just more upset. And put yourself in the patient's shoes. Let's say if it was your mother and you had a tech who didn't know anything and just was a button pusher, how would you feel? Right? So ask yourself that question because that's the same concept that I take away and I introduce to the techs that I'm training or even my students. And I said, how would you feel? Let's say if that's your mother laying on the table right now instead of this patient, if that's your mom, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I just blasted her with contrast, and all of a sudden she dies, how would you feel? Right? So that's the same thing that we need to take away from, and we have to remember that. So you seasoned techs, don't feel intimidated when they know more than you, because you know what? You can learn something from each other. This technology is continuing to evolve, okay? And it doesn't stay the same. The practices and things that we used to do 20 years ago, it no longer applies. There's something new now. And in 5 years' time, there's going to be something even newer than that, right? So don't feel intimidated at all. And don't make those new technologists feel intimidated because they're there to learn because you were a newbie at one time. So remember that, okay? Now, with this example that I just gave you, I'm going to tell you a story. Okay. This happened 10 years ago. It was at a hospital in the state I currently live in. It's another trauma hospital because there are several trauma hospitals in the state of Illinois. And I work at one, the one I work at now is one of the busiest, and just exactly where we're located, we get all the bad traumas, even within a 150-mile radius from, other states. Okay. So I worked at another trauma hospital and I had been there, I had just moved to the state of Illinois. It was before I had my last daughter. So I was there, and really I didn't need a lot of training because I was pretty seasoned at that time. Okay. I had already 11 years in CT. So I was pretty seasoned. I knew what I was doing. I had never worked at a trauma hospital of that capacity. So it was a little bit of a learning curve, and they have Toshiba. So I got to learn a new system, which I picked up really quickly. It's a little bit more difficult, but once you learn it, you know it. So there was a technologist that worked during the day because I worked day shift, and this technologist had probably about 8 years in. And the one thing that I liked about her, she had a lot of energy. She was very bubbly. She was very loud. And I enjoy people like that. Okay. Not to mention that people who are quiet and introverted, you know what? I like those people too because I like everyone, because I'm very introverted myself. I'm kind of like an introvert extrovert, a little bit, because I was very shy growing up as a kid. So she just was very bubbly, had a, very strong personality, and just was, very out there and very loud. And just, I enjoyed her energy because, she was always very positive, and, she talked about her husband, she talked about her son, all that. Right. So there came where we started adding staff, and there was another technologist there, and he had probably the same amount of experience that I do. And I just connected with him very well. Like, we talked about, our spouses, because I was married at the time, and our kids. And so then he was asking me questions about how to do like a CTA head and neck, like just to name all the vessels, because he was having a hard time remembering the vessels, right? So because he was doing like some continuing education, and so we were going back over that. And so I said, okay. And then I was asking him questions about his training and things like that. So, just a typical. Well, this other technologist was working with us, and I guess she felt intimidated because I seemed to know more about CT than she did. So she got angry and came at me and got in my face, literally, and told me that I needed to shut the conversation down and I needed to stop because I was not a manager, I was not a supervisor, and I needed to just not talk about what I didn't know. And so I went to her and I said, "Listen, if you feel intimidated by me, I'm sorry." And I said, "But we were just talking and nobody was disrespecting you," because she felt disrespected. Okay. Furthermore, she was very angry about that. So I just said, "You know what? I'm just going to remove myself from this situation," because at that time I was also pregnant with my last child. So I just said, "You know what? It's fine." And I remember the other tech that I was working with, he came up to me and he's like, "You know what? Don't even bother. Just ignore her. It's not even that serious." I was like, "You know what? I don't let things like that bother me, because if people are intimidated, it has something to do with them. It doesn't have anything to do with me." Now, fast forward, we are doing a case because um, the inpatient side of CT, outpatient, and then ER were all separate. Okay. And they had called me up because I was the only one on the shift that day that knew how to do cardiacs. So I said, "Listen, this patient's going to surgery. Can you please come upstairs to do this cardiac?" I said, "Sure, no problem." So I went ahead and came upstairs into the main department and set up the patient, got everything that the radiologist needed, because there were two radiologists that actually read all the cardiacs. If anybody knows, radiologists have to take special training to read cardiac CTs. So usually a cardiologist will read those, but we had two on staff that actually did that. So he thanked me very much about doing that. And so I had asked, I said, "Okay, well, is he going for a cabbage?" They were like, "Yeah, he just had surgery, but he's going to have another one." So this technologist says, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, what's a cabbage?" So I said, "Well, it's a coronary artery bypass graft." And I go, "It's something that they do, when they have heart surgery. So if there's a blockage in the coronaries, they bypass it to something else. They'll take like an artery out of the leg and, to, make sure that blood flows through the heart properly, and they'll put stents, in the patient's, in the patient's chest." "Oh, I didn't know that. You're really smart." I said, "Well, thank you." And I said, "Well, if you ever want to learn from me, I don't gatekeep anything. Like, I'm more than welcome to share knowledge with you." So the point of that story is that, some people have said, because there were other texts there and they were saying, "Well, see, she doesn't know that much." They said, "Oh, well," one of them actually called her a dummy, which was not the right thing to do. And I had to talk to him and say, "Listen, that's not the right thing to do. You can't say that." Okay. But, and I said, "Here's the thing that I want you to take away from that." Okay. And I said, "The thing is that when you invest in yourself, in educating yourself, and making sure you know about your profession because you're passionate about it, some people feel that, hey, oh, you think you're better than me," because that's a problem within themselves and an insecurity about themselves. So what I took away from that is that probably she did not get the proper training, okay? And she did not get the proper education, but those are things that you have to invest in yourself and do for yourself. Nobody can do that for you, okay? But she genuinely wanted to learn and didn't know these things. And some people will think, "Well, after 8 years, you should know that." You'd be surprised on how many technologists don't, because they don't. Okay. So I took away as that as a learning opportunity, as you should not feel intimidated by me just because I may have more years under my belt than you do. But there's always a opportunity to learn from anybody. It doesn't matter where you at, how many years you have. So after that, her and I got along great. There was no issues. Okay. But then she ended up leaving because she needed to work somewhere closer because she lived pretty far and had to commute into the city to, to come to work. So that is an interesting story. And it's one of those stories that I have in my Pandora's box. I mean, I have many stories when it comes to CT. I have seen a lot of things, I have encountered a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that will haunt me because of just some of the things that we come across. So, what I want you to take away is no technologist is ever dumb. Okay. I don't want you to think that. It is just a lack of education and training. So all we have to do is just say, "Hey, I can help you. This is this. If you want help, I'm here. I can show you a couple things." That's how we have to proceed, and that's how we're going to make these new technologies just better than ever. Okay? So, hope you enjoyed this episode. Hopefully this was really insightful as far as the story I told, because I have many stories. So make sure you guys sign up for the 3-day life challenge that I'm going to be teaching on how to be the go-to CT tech. Okay. All the information will be down in the show notes on when I will be teaching that life challenge. It'll be 3 days. I'm going to be teaching you 3 strategies on how to be the go-to CT tech that are really important. And some of these strategies are some of the ones that you've heard in some of these prior podcast episodes. Okay. Also, make sure that if you have any questions or you have an interesting CT story, or even if you want to be a guest, all the information will be down in the show notes. Send me an email. There's a form to fill out to be a guest on the show. And come on over to Instagram. Make sure you give me a follow on Instagram. I always put, all the interesting stuff about CT on my page on Instagram. Okay. Also, I'm also on Facebook. So I have a Facebook page, same handle at the CT Educator. So make sure you follow that. All right. And if you feel that you want to dive into more about how to be just the best technologist you can, I do offer a 6-month coaching program that I am going to open the doors to in June. So it's a 6-month program, and I get you prepared not only to be the go-to CT tech, but I also get you prepared so you can feel confident in taking that CT registry. Okay. All the information will be down in the show notes. As always, thank you so much for supporting the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell everybody. And I hope you enjoy these episodes and continue to listen from here on forward. So thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next week.